You see it in elite athletes, what happens after Peter Sagan wins 3 world championships? Right?
Yeah.
Is the flame gone?
Yeah.
Or what happens, and the same question is faced by me, what happens after I win a national championship? So what happens if one of my athletes wins a national championships, then what? Or even if you're a beginner, right, your goal was to start your first race, what happens after that?
Yeah.
So the way I deal with it is simple. I make sure that I don't define the end goal or the terminus of my journey as like winning something. I always kind of keep a pie in the sky kind of goal, something beyond, something that's almost never perhaps attainable, or only attainable if everything goes perfectly, right? And the fear is in the competition.
Yeah.
The person you're really battling at the end, that we all are battling at the end of that day, is our inner voice.
Yeah.
That self-doubt.
Yeah.
That is the biggest nemesis.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned. It's imposter syndrome. It's like, I don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not fit enough, or I don't deserve the win, That's what I've learned from sport. It's the biggest competitor is that, and it's not the other guy who you're battling on the day. And as soon as you realize that, you start to operate on a different level, I feel. So for me, it's just kind of having this growth mindset that's just not focused on one metric.
Yeah.
For me, strength training. How can I improve my knowledge about lifting weights, more specifically to cycling, to increase my gains in other departments, right? How can I learn more about prehab and injury prevention so that I can ride longer and later into my life, right?
Yeah.
How can I learn more about nutrition and mental strategies to coping with failure and successes?
Right.
So there's so many aspects.
I am Baiki Venki, and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. Today's guests need no introduction for any cyclist in India. He started out as a 100-kilo obese youngster who picked up sport to lose weight while pursuing an engineering degree in the US. He underwent a metamorphosis to turn himself into a multiple-time national champion. He got into sport late in life but seems to be making up for all the lost time. He continues to astound his competitors as he continues to make gains at an age which many consider is beyond the time to retire. He has been a huge influence on the cycling ecosystem in India. From coaching some of the best athletes in India to helping even his rivals get better at sport, he has single-handedly raised the level of sport in India, in my opinion. His name is Naveen John, NJ for all of us. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, NJ. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast.
It's awesome being here, Venki. And thank you for reminding me of my age to start off with.
Because I always calculate your age because you are exactly 10 years younger to me.
Okay.
So I know how old are you at any given point of time. Let us start by talking about your work with Wattbombs coaching. And the coaching philosophy at Wattbombs. What do you see, Wattbombs going?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, people always ask me, people always wonder, both, athletes of all different ages, who kind of try to visualize what an elite level athlete does. I think most people just imagine that I ride bikes, sleep and eat, right? I'd love to do that, but ultimately gotta pay the rent, gotta pay for insurance, gotta pay for equipment. It's like being a sponsored athlete is not everything that it's painted to be, and there's a lot of stuff, just expenses that go towards supporting the lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle. And so Wattbombs coaching initially started off as nothing to meet that end. It was a pure kind of happenstance where a friend of mine, Vivek, one of my team managers, well, even before that, I unofficially coached a lot of the riders on the Kinkini team, right? And it was really cool. I liked kind of coming up with plans, getting athletes to kind of comply with those plans, seeing their progression because of it. And having experienced the benefits of coaching myself, having someone external that kind of drives your progression and really gets rid of all those roadblocks along the way, that whole paradigm was something that was just so interesting to me, right? And eventually a friend of mine actually approached me and said, hey, do you offer coaching? And Farah Avasarla, and she's a really good runner, and a master's athlete, and she was like, would you be interested in coaching? And I was like, coaching me or my bike. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that in an official capacity, I'm doing it because it's fun. And so Farah was one of my first coached athletes, and it was an awesome experience. I think both her and I learned just so much from that whole coach-athlete relationship. And it's kind of sowed the seeds a little bit, and for a year or two I just kind of did it with a couple athletes, one or two athletes. Kiran, we won his first national title as a coach athlete, and I really poured all my energy into that, and I realized for the first time how I can experience kind of winning and the joys of winning, not just by winning myself, but through kind of helping an athlete on their journey, right? So that was the other aspect of kind of coaching that I got into there, right? Winning is just not something that I can enjoy, it's something that I can help someone kind of, achieve and enjoy, partake in that enjoyment, right? So, and for the longest time, for about 2 years, it was like one or two athletes on a one-on-one basis. And in 2018 December, I just kind of randomly said, hey, why don't I do this? Why don't I try scaling this up, right? And that's where Wattbombs coaching started to turn a little bit from kind of a hobby to fill time to something that I just purely enjoyed doing, to something a little bit more formal. So I went from coaching 2 athletes to 12 that December. I remember it was 2 days before Christmas. I just put out a post, bombarded with messages, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know there was this demand or this need for people to kind of who are interested in getting coached, and so that just opened up my mind to kind of the actual kind of, there is a market for it, right? And then I started thinking, okay, before I head out on this journey of just coaching for the sake of coaching and coaching to make ends meet, it's like I've got to have some principles and things on which my coaching ethic is based off of, my business of coaching is based off of. So that took me a while. I kind of had an idea of what it was in my head, but scaling it up and taking on more people really forced me to define those things, what it means to be a Wattbombs athlete, and so recently I kind of came out with this idea of this Wattbombs elite, a hashtag right now. Yeah. But it's I like to think of it as more than more than a team. We can be wearing, Wattbombs elite athletes can be wearing different jerseys, they can be different ages, they can have different levels of goals, but essentially at the heart of it, what it represents is Wattbombs athletes have what I call the 3 Ps: passion for the sport, they're persistent in the face of challenges, and because of that they progress. So every Wattbombs athlete, I want to see them grow. If I see an athlete who's stagnating, either there's something wrong with my approach, my coaching method, or there's a disconnect between what the athlete wants to achieve and the methods I used to, or we used to go about it, right? So passion, persistence, progression is that ethic, right? The Wattbombs elite ethic. And so, yeah, I mean, that takes up a lot of my time, you know. I work with about 24 athletes today, and I say no to more people than I say yes, because I literally tell, when people reach out to me for coaching, I'm like, I start off with, I'm the wrong coach for you, you know, and I list out the reasons why, you know, because yeah, I mean, Wattbombs coaching is, you know, not for the ordinary, you know, and that's the way I want to be. I don't want to be a mass coaching product, at least not now, you know. Maybe down the line, think about ways to leverage technology to scale like a coaching product. And the thing is, there are a ton of products out there that do that these days, right? Trainer Road, and that's what I tell a lot of people. Point them in the right direction. You know?
Absolutely.
Look at Trainer Road, look at FastCat, you know, look at, there's a bunch of great generic training plans out there. You don't need me necessarily, and not everyone needs that direction, you know. So yeah, that's kind of what Wattbombs coaching in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah, you know, a lot of people would just need a kind of plan that they can follow, and not necessarily need the level of direction that you provide.
True. Yeah, I mean, everyone looks for something a little different from their coach, and it's all about expectations. So another question I ask potential athletes who want to work with me is, what are your expectations of a coach? Does he have to bring the motivation for you in the morning to wake up? Does he have to bring the ability to do Google searches to define terms? Is it someone to just have a chat with about technical terms and you know, maybe increase your cycling IQ a little bit? For me, I feel there are better ways to spend my time, and I feel like athletes would probably be better served by me hooking them up or pointing them in the right direction of resources to meet that, right? What I bring to the table is I know what I'm good at, you know. I know how to navigate the system. I know what the opportunities for an athlete from India at any level is in terms of training, in terms of racing, both in India and abroad. So I bring that, you know, and that's, and then unless I sense that an athlete is ready to take advantage of those resources that I have to offer, I typically say, hey, you know what? There's some better options for you out there, you know. So
the point about that motivation, right? That is a very, very important thing. That is something that I also kind of ask people. If you are not motivated from yourself, if the motivation doesn't come from within you, from within your, driving from your passion for the sport, no one else can motivate you.
Absolutely.
And that becomes a main criteria also for someone who want to look at me.
Yeah, I think if you're working one-on-one with a coach, and really you've got to bring the goals, they've got to mean something to you, your why for riding. And it can be anything. It can be just getting faster on your local climb, or improving your FTP, or an objective goal, a competitive goal. You've got to bring the goals, you've got to bring the motivation, and the coach gives you the direction. And another thing that a coach brings that's really hard to advertise is what they do, or what a good coach does is, it's great when your FTP is going up, when it's sunny outside, when you're you feel fit and you're moving fast on the bike. What happens when you get your niggle, when you get that crash, and that derailleur snaps, or when that indoor workout just seems not completable for some reason? For me, that's what I think. That's where I think a coach really comes in, and a good coach really steps up. He's got to be there when shit hits the fan, so
Absolutely.
that there's that continuity in training, because
Yeah.
that's where all progression comes from. And on an individual level, that's where satisfaction comes from, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So you just talked about people needing to know why, right?
Yeah.
So what is your why?
Oof. I mean, it's an interesting question. It's a timely question, right? I think, if anything, the past 6 to 9 months really forced a lot of us to answer the question. Well, the key to a lot of life's answers is not the answers, but asking the right questions. So, and I think what is your why is something that is super important to be able to answer on a deep sense, not just on a surface level, but really just being able to look at yourself in the mirror and honestly say, oh, this is my why, you know? And essentially what the pandemic did for a lot of us is it forced us to think about, it was a simulation retirement. It's like, oh man, if I have nothing to do in life, this is what it's going to be, So what am I going to do to keep myself happy? Right? And, for me as an athlete, you take out the competitive calendar and life almost seems meaningless, right? But fortunately for me, after I won my first national title, it dawned on me. I asked myself the question, and I asked Vivek, my team manager back then. We were eating dinner after I won my first national title by half a second. And I said, now what? Like, what does this mean? And I asked Vivek that question. Either he didn't hear me, or he pretended not to hear me, but there was no answer, And in that moment, I realized, what? No amount of national titles or amount of wins or amount of, competitively superior performances is going to be the answer to the question of why. So I'm glad that kind of serendipitously kind of hit me in the head, very quickly after my first win. And ever since then, I've been trying to answer that question. And really, for me, the answer is I love riding my bike, and I love the. For me, it's my meditation. I was having a conversation with one of my athletes, and he asked me, what do you think is the importance of meditation, right? And it's just a word, right? And what it means is, it means time to be with your thoughts, and for everyone it's different. For some people it's sitting cross-legged and clearing their mind. For some people it's just 5 deep breaths. For me, my definition of meditation is climbing up an infinitely long climb. That would be my meditation, because you're moving slow, moving up a climb at tempo, let's put it that way, because you're not suffering enough. You can actually think. It's a very moment of lucidity. It's one of the reasons why I love climbing Nandi, because it's 20-minute chunks of meditation for me,
And you focus on your breathing like you do
it's
on
meditation. Literally, right? It's the psychosomatic definition of of meditation, right? You focus on breathing. You center your thoughts on one particular thing, whatever that thing is, and you resolve that thing, whether it's a question in your head, to its end, right? Or to some end, right? And that essentially closure. It gives you that. For me, that's meditation. For me, that's my why to a large extent. I love riding my bike because it centers me. And then the competitive aspect, exploring different types of riding, setting different targets. Those are just process, kind of intermediary kind of, whys, right? It's the big why is exercise, riding a bike, for me, centers me. So,
Absolutely. That's a great, I think that's a great why to have, because you are never going to lose it.
Exactly. Yeah. No one can take it away from you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not like you have a goal and you achieve it and then what?
Yeah. A pandemic can't take it away. What can take it away is injury, things like that. I mean, and that's they say health is wealth, right? And you slowly start to realize, I mean, as an elite athlete, you pick up a niggle and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the world's starting to fall apart, right? So yeah, I'm just thankful every day that I'm healthy and I'm able to ride my bike, So, yeah.
Great. So that kind of brings me to now we have talked about the Wattbombs and your why. So let us take a step back and talk about how it all started for you. Say, take us a little bit through your childhood, your education, and
Okay.
not like a
Yeah,
60-minute
correct,
thing, but a
60
quick
second, yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And how did you end up picking a bike?
The short version of it is I grew up in the Middle East.
Hmm.
Life involved a lot of Kit Kats and shawarma sandwiches. I left home and got independence for the first time when when I went for college to the US. I didn't have a good structure of what it meant to live a healthy lifestyle, a balanced lifestyle, right?
Mm.
For me, growing up as a kid, it was it was education, it was classes, it was being top of the class, and that was it, and hanging out with friends, right? I had no concept of physical activity or sport, right? Of sweating it out, and also I had no concept of what it meant to eat a balanced diet. To a large extent, it's the culture of the Middle East. You're indoors a lot. Activity is considered going to the mall, or as people like to call themselves, foodies, which just means mindless eating, right? I think it's a great crutch word, but so that essentially was a product of my lifestyle. I think is where I got to the point where I was, got to my heaviest, and then the point where everything kind of flipped a little bit was when my college roommate invited me home to a Thanksgiving. Around the same time this year, it was probably back in 2011 or 2010, so almost 10 years ago. And he invited me to his house, and big American Midwestern family up in Wisconsin. They love their basketball and stuff like that. Up in Notre Dame, actually, in Indiana, and we played before Thanksgiving dinner. We said, let's burn some calories, and this is like 100-kilo me, right? And I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm very afraid because I've never played basketball before or run, up and down a basketball court. But my friend had a big family, two brothers, three sisters. They had a basketball team, essentially.
Yeah.
So it was guys versus girls, and I was on the girls' team. And because they felt like, yeah, that was my ability. And everyone was running circles around me. And it was the first time it just hit me. I was like, man, I'm really physically inept,
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't like this, and there was a little bit of that academic competitiveness in me always since I was a kid because, again, of the lifestyle and the way I was brought up. And when I went back home to uni after that Thanksgiving weekend, thick of the winter, I just woke up one night. I was really kind of, wrestling with this thought of my physical ineptitude, and I was like, well, I think it's easy to run, so I bought a pair of Brooks running shoes on Zappos, and because it was Black Friday, that stuff, and same time of year, and I started going out on these 3-kilometer runs every day. It was sad, it took me forever to run. It was painful. It was cold outside, but every day I came back and I felt better for it. It's just, there's something about exercise and the endorphins and the serotonin and all that feel good hormones. I didn't know why then, I know why now, but that's what got me hooked on that, the exercise and the positive effects of it, because everything started to fall in place after that. My personal relationships with friends, I had more confidence, I was really shy of standing up in front of class and doing my, I had a speech class and things like that. Now I wasn't as, conscious because it was that kind of deep level of confidence, And one thing led to the next. I ended up running into the cycling club at my university. The people there just, and just kind of accepted me, and I was introduced to racing there, really low pressure, racing for absolute fun. My idea of racing back when I was in college was just attacking a lot, you know, and spending a lot of time on the front, because I knew when the racing got really hard, I would get dropped. So I mean, you see that with a lot of new riders, right? Yeah. Expression of strength in the beginning is some consolation, right? Yes. Because you know you're going to get dropped in the end. But I just kept showing up, you know, and I kept getting faster. Thanks to a lot of mentors along the way, people who, whether they realized it or not, really helped in my development by pushing me, you know. And yeah, whether it was my first century, which I had never done, or my first double century, or the first climbing training camp that I did, all of that, all of those mental boundaries and physical boundaries, I overcame because of the support system of collegiate cycling, you know, and the friends that I had made there. And then I think the next big turning point is 2012 when I was done with my graduation. I was looking at getting into grad school, and you know, started taking courses for that. And I was in this one engineering lab of mine in a basement in the winter again. The winter, I have a bad relationship with it, but and I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, you know, sit in a basement somewhere writing code, you know, and soldering a bunch of, you know, ICs, right? And I just looked at what the scene was in India. I think I ran across your blog. At that point, I think you were talking about BBCH at that point, right? And then I ran into Pro Cycle, which is a bicycle shop, Bums on the Saddle, and I was like, whoa, there's cycling in India? I mean, like road bikes, and like, you know, there's racing. I'm like, that's good enough. Yeah. Okay, and I literally booked tickets that one night, one-way tickets. I think I told my parents, I'm not sure. I think I did. I had to have, because they paid for the tickets. So, and I came back, and then that was the start of, you know, the rest of my journey in cycling. And that's what a lot of people see in India. It's just that part. Yeah. So you know, while let us talk about that in a bit, but I just want to take one step back and talk a little bit about that weight loss journey. How much time did it take to say from the time you picked up those Brooks and started riding those 3 kilometers per day to say till you picked up your first bike? How much did you lose? Really quickly. Yeah. So the Brooks shoes I picked up, and within 3 months, so the winter basically, November, December, January, 3 months, 3K, pretty much every day, 5 days a week for the most part, and coupled with, and that was running, not riding. Yeah. Coupled with, I had this weird diet where it was Walmart $1 spinach. Yeah. Walmart $1 tomatoes, which you get this big bag, and Walmart tuna in water, right? And Walmart orange juice. So for $4 a day, I went on this weird diet where it was tuna salad. I think there was lemon in there, maybe, and some salt, and OJ. That was all I ate. And I lost about 15 kilos in 3 months. I don't recommend it to anyone. Yeah. Now I know it's like really unbalanced. But the thing is, when you're really overweight, you can do drastic stuff like this. You're not putting your body in that much danger, just because you've got so much nutrients packed in that you can draw onto. You can, exactly. You're not gonna like, you know, end up nutrient deficient or anything like that. Yeah. And food in the US, fortunately, is just, you know, hyper fortified and like, you know, a lot of additional stuff. So I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but it works. I mean, it worked. Let's put it that way. And then I got my first bike, which is a mountain bike, because I went to this call out for a charity organization, Habitat for Humanity, and they were doing a 120-mile ride over a weekend. I thought we were just going to build houses, but I went into this call out, start of semester, you know, recruitment, and they were like, "This is the call out for the 120-mile ride. You just put your name down. You're doing it, you know." And this is also another bunch of people who are just like so encouraging. And I still remember these days, a lot of them, you know, the way in which the community of cyclists just kind of likes taking on new people. I think that is really what got me into it. And then next thing you know, I was training for this bike ride. The day of the bike ride, there's this story which a lot of people bring back, a lot of my friends in the US bring back whenever they talk about me getting into cycling. They say, oh, this was the guy who got hit by the bus in the parking lot the morning of that ride.
Wow.
Because I was just riding a road bike so I was training on a mountain bike. In the morning of the ride, we were pulling out of the parking lot. There was some donuts and coffee and all that. I'm like, somebody donated a road bike for me to ride. I took it out for a spin. I didn't know where the brakes were because on a mountain bike it's like this. And I was literally spinning out on the road and this bus basically T-boned me.
Whoa.
That's how I still ended up doing the ride. I didn't end up finishing it. I had to get into the sag wagon at the end of the first day. To split up into 60 miles. I couldn't finish the first day, but finished the second day. And that got me hooked on to the whole kind of, ended up getting a road bike, getting into racing. So that happened all within the span of about 6 months. Yeah.
Wow.
Very quickly, yeah.
So this 120-mile ride was what, 1 month into the picking up the bike? Couple of months.
3 months after I'd lost 15 kilos, went down to about 85, and then got into the mountain bike.
Yeah.
And I lost another, over the course of 3 months training for this 120-mile ride, I probably lost another 5 kilos or something, not a lot.
Right.
The riding always ends up, with a lot less weight loss, because at that point I also left the habit of the regiment of tuna salad.
Yeah.
Because for some reason cycling is a little bit more forgiving with the extra weight. Running isn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the journey in short.
Awesome. So that was your first 100-miler and stuff like that. So, and this got you hooked onto cycling.
Yeah.
Right. And then how did you kind of end up in racing?
Racing was my collegiate cycling club and at Purdue, and it was actually a friend of mine who you know also, Derek.
Yeah.
Who you met at TFN in 2012. He's one of those guys that changed my way of doing things in life a little bit. Sometimes you pick up things from people in terms of habits and ways of living life, but you don't get to thank them in any way for it, and Derek's one of those guys who kind of taught me, I've never seen another human being who's able to go from not doing something to doing something, right? To act on an instinct or an idea as quickly as he does. And he met me outside a library, again on a winter's night. I was locking up my bike, he was there, he saw me, he knew I'd come to one of the club rides, and he's like, hey, you should race with us this weekend, and Derek, he's like very so hyperactive. He's got ADD, but I think it's brilliant. It makes him who he is, and he's like, you should race next weekend. We're going to Missouri, and
talks in spurts.
It's talks in spurts without any details, without anything. He's just like, you should do it, and because of that, just that instinctual genuineness that I picked up off him, I was like, you know what, I should do it. And it's hard to refuse the guy. It's like, at TFN, let's go eat some beef fry. And then he got sick the next day, right? He's like, it's phenomenal. But that mindset of just jump in, just do it, that's the thing that got me into racing, and that's what I tell a lot of people in cycling and just in sport and stuff like that here in India. It's just like, just show up, just do it, it doesn't matter if you're not the fastest guy, it doesn't matter if you're unfit, it doesn't matter if you have a mountain bike. That's the easy bits, right? This one action has the potential to change the direction of your life, right? So do it, you never know, right? So it's a hard point to get across. But
Yeah, absolutely. So action is,
absolutely
the thing that you got to do. So you started out on racing by insistence of Derek, and you got into it. But how, say, this was in the second year of your engineering and stuff, and by the time you completed your graduation, how much... what is the kind of progression you saw?
The other thing about progression, right? For me, it was So during the spring semester, we would have the racing season on the road. In the summer, there would be no college, so we would do the normal USAC races, USA Cycling. And then in the winter, there was the mountain bike season, which not a lot of us raced because it's another piece of equipment that we couldn't afford in college. So in the winter, in the fall and winter, we'd end up training a lot. That was the cycle, right? And I didn't know what opportunities were there in cycling as a sport, and really, I just kind of hung out with the club a lot, you know, and it's that's where the social aspect of cycling comes in. You do a lot of cycling's knowledge and the opportunities that exist in the sport come from just creating this, hanging out with the social group of cycling, right? Yeah. And so fortunately, it was that club environment made it easy to do that. Also, we had every Monday where we have a meeting at a restaurant and we'd eat burritos and chips. Yeah. And we'd have a club meeting on Wednesdays, and then we'd have our group rides that were sent out on a mailing list. We'd all meet at the Corec and then do different kinds of rides. And so there was this kind of this rough structure, and so for me it was just like I wasn't thinking about getting better at racing or anything like that, or getting faster. I didn't know what FTP was. I didn't have a power meter. I didn't have a heart rate monitor. Back then I was just like, is my average speed going up? It's like 25 and there is miles an hour, right? So 18 miles an hour, oh man, for 60, man, I must be getting stronger. And so for me, the racing, it was just it was a consequence of just enjoying my bike, and yeah, I got faster. The thing is, you do anything long enough and consistently enough, you get better at it. It's like you brush your teeth twice a day, they're going to be white at the end of the month. And that was the same thing with my racing. It was just I just rode, and I didn't look at improving my results too much. I didn't know concept of tactics, how to conserve. My idea of racing was go out, ride really hard, blow up, and then finish somehow. And that stayed my mentality for a very long time. Actually, it was not until this decision time came to eventually you kind of move up in categories. And to move up in categories, you got to get results. Yeah. So that became an incentive, just that categorization of racing, the idea that there is something above this level that I am in now. It's like a video game, right? It's like, oh, I need to go to the next level. So it was the same thing. I mean,
so by the end of say the college, what cat did you?
So when I left the US, I was cat A in the collegiate side. So I raced my first collegiate nationals, which was an amazing experience. It started on this ridiculous descent, and I got dropped on the descent. Forget about the climbing. That was my experience at collegiate nationals. Absolutely shell shocked. And I mean, the guys who end up in the top 10 there all ended up riding on some sort of professional setup for a year or two, or some even longer. Guys like Phil Gaiman and a lot of guys you see on the Pro Tour also came through collegiate cycling. So that was Cat A in college. I started at nationals, collegiate nationals, got dropped on the first descent, and then in the USAC racing, so the non-collegiate racing, the highest I'd gotten to was a Cat 2, and I was going to get my Cat 1 upgrade. So the last race I did was the weekend before I traveled back to India, and I was never so motivated to get a result than at that race. There's something about the pressure of taking the next step that is just so incentivizing, and I rode on my skin in that race. It was a race in Michigan called the Tour of Mount Pleasant, and I still look back to some of my results, and I always won either in a breakaway, in a small breakaway, or solo. One of my most memorable wins was when I moved from Cat 3 to Cat 2, and I broken away from the field in this really competitive Cat 3 race, one of the most competitive Cat 3 races there. And just my racing style kind of started developing there, breakaway, small groups. I really had a nose for, kind of sniffing out what the right moves were.
Who were the right guys?
Exactly, yeah. There was this one race where I got into this break. It was a Pro 1-2 race, which was also open to the Cat 3s. and there was this guy named Mike Shearer, Indiana University alumni, and he used to write on a protein Kelly benefit strategies, and which is the precursor to rally cycling. You've probably heard of it. But he used to wear these yellow Mavic shoes, and I set my goal as a race of do not let go of the yellow Mavic shoes.
Right.
And halfway into the race, I was just looking at his shoes, and we were in a break together.
Wow.
So I mean, it's the stuff that I kind of learned there, and the habits that I developed there that have kind of carried on through to now, and my racing style and stuff like that. Now it's a little bit more cerebral. I really have to think about how can I win, or how can one of my athletes win. So the definition of what victory is has changed for me a little bit, but
right.
the basics are remaining.
So this I what I see is a steady progression, fueled by your passion, or just for the love of it, riding a bike, and you ended up at the end of the college, right? And there came a point where you have to decide about your future.
Yeah.
And that is a scary time for anybody.
Yeah.
Right? So what made you make that? What was the logic behind leaving college in US, right?
Yeah.
And coming, packing your bike and your bag and coming and landing up in Bangalore, India.
I know, right? I mean, all of us at some point have to make we come to forks in the road, right? And most humans, most of us, we end up walking down the path that's the most, that you can see down the longest, And for me, when I was at that juncture, man, it's like one path you look down, it's like totally hypothetical, right? Go to India, win a national championship, somehow figure out how to support myself, maybe work at an IT company and race on the side, maybe volunteer for Teach for India, which I got accepted to, or maybe a LAMP fellowship, which is a Legislative Assembly fellowship that I'd applied to and also got selected, and then train on the side, live in Mumbai. What is Mumbai like? And this is for a kid who grew up in the Middle East, and India is like as much of a culture shock as America was when I came there. So it's this path which is absolutely, it's like the roads in Bangalore right now, completely dug up and non-existent, right? And then there's this other path which is like, okay, get a job, make 60 grand a year, and get an MBA 2 years later. I mean, it's that path that is just so clear.
It's beaten.
But the crystal clearness of it is the scary part.
Yeah.
Right? And 99 out of 100 people take that path.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I decided to take this other path. I don't know what led me to believe that I'd not just walk down that path and end up like a footnote, or be forced to kind of jump across to this other path. I think it's just a product of the lives we've lived, and maybe just the quotes we read on the internet at a particular time at night, and there are certain kind of principles that I kind of picked up along the way from a lot of my friends, people who meant a lot in my life, and I'm a little bit of an idealist who executes as a realist, So I guess it's just a product of kind of my path to that point. I just read enough of the right quotes.
I think at least knowing you a little bit, watching you over the years, although you are an idealist executing as a pragmatist, that pragmatism part, I think, would have made you do some calculations before you
for sure
taking that step.
I definitely did calculations, but
was it like your FTP at that point of time?
A little bit. I mean, I looked at results sheets. I looked at I looked at potential competitors. I looked at what they were doing, and they weren't doing much. I was like, there isn't actually any work going on here.
Yeah.
It's so amateur.
Yeah.
and my level of my approach, the way I know I bring a little bit more in the cerebral department, and so I was like, if I can't do this, then I can't do anything much in life. And I was like, okay, that gave me a little bit of confidence to just take that step, you know. That said, it took me 2 years to achieve that goal, right? Even though I came in with a decent level of confidence, and that's where I realized it's great to theorize in your head, but unless you prove it, you know, to yourself, it doesn't matter, you know. So so I was pretty quiet about my goals and stuff like that. And I was looking back at my Strava from 2012 when I first came here, and I mean I was training just as hard. So I'm like, okay, what's the difference between me then and me now? My FTP's not gone up that much, you know, maybe 20-25 watts in 8 years. So what's changed? And that's when I realized, you know, there's 100 different things, right? From self-belief to being able to deal with challenges. I would say that if I were to write a handbook with all the challenges one can experience towards winning a national title in India and training and living in the constraints of India, I could probably write a book that's about 20 pages big. A handbook. It wouldn't be like a full-on novel, but and there would be bullet points, 120 bullet points, and that the real world execution, right? That's the hard part. It's so easy to think about winning a nationals. There's some kid in Belgium who's 16 years old, who's got a higher FTP than me. Doesn't mean he can win nationals, right? So that's just to answer kind of that question specifically.
So that's a good point about you landing up here in 2012. I still remember the first race you were part of, and I was part of. I think you landed up the day before the race. It was
did a recce of the course. I was like, whoa, what am I doing here? Banarghatta Road. I had my mom drive me out because I was afraid of riding from Sarjapur to Banarghatta. And then from Banarghatta, I started riding on the bike, and I was like, trucks were passing by. You know?
So it was a race in Jigani. And I remember being there in the race. We were in the front group, and I think I got dropped pretty quickly, but then it was like a out and back kind of road, and on the way to the finish, I saw one dude going past like this, and a few guys chasing and stuff like that. And like, okay, this, some dude, because at that time I knew pretty much everyone in Bangalore, and you were not one of them. And at the end of the race, we got to know that, okay, this dude in a green jersey is on podium. Yellow shoes, Mavic shoes. And is on the podium. And who is he? It's like a big talking point. And Kinkini was there, Spectrum Racing that I'm part of was there. And we immediately kind of approached you. We at the finish line, we talked about exchanging numbers and stuff. Reached out and said, "Who are you?"
I remember asking for your number because I wanted to join you guys on a ride to Nandi. Because I didn't know where I was.
So it's like, okay, he's a strong guy, because that was the time where when teams were forming. Right? And we wanted to get the best riders in the team. So it was like, I remember having that conversation with you. And talking about, you looking for a job or thinking through about it and all that. And you ended up at the right place, which is Kinkini team. But you, from that 2012 to 2014, right, when you first won that national title by half a second. Half a second.
Exactly.
So walk us through those couple of years, the kind of struggles you had navigating the system in India and stuff.
So what I learned there, I think if I were to boil it down to three things, one is about people, right? The team that I was part of, the group that I was part of, ultimately there's this saying, right? You're the average of the people or the 5 people you hang out with most of the time. And it's so true, you know, I mean, I think the group that I was part of there, I eventually ended up working at Bots, so that was my work life. My social life was hanging out with my teammates back then. My competitive cycling life was hanging out with, you know, Vivek and, you know, the boys, Loki, and, you know, the decision makers and the kind of people driving it. And then, of course, my outer social circle, which was kind of the Bangalore cycling community, right?
Yeah.
I realized that I was getting a lot of energy from these people, and I made it a point to give back a lot of that energy. You know, saying the right things, doing the right things, showing up to just tell people that, hey, I'm in this with you guys. You know, that was something I made a conscious effort to do, and I think the reason why Bangalore cycling is where it is today is because a lot of us did that. Right? You. Rowan Kinney, Arvind Bateja, you know, all these people, right? And it didn't happen just randomly, right? It was a whole bunch of people who were really just feeding off each other's energy, being inspired by each other, inspiring back, you know, being generous with their time, Jay behind the camera, you know. So that was one thing I learned, the power of kind of giving just a little bit of your energy, because it's going to pay back. It's going to lift you up in moments where you say, oh, why the hell am I doing this? You know, that's one thing that I learned then. The second thing is with respect to the system. And, you know, when I came here, it was this idea of like, oh man, we're going to change the world. Like Kinkini was like going to be the first professional team, and we had these big aspirations, and, you know, people really stepped up to help us out, whether it was specialized, and it was just a couple of people really at the end of the day. You know, people look at companies and brands and stuff like that, but it's really just personal relationships. Vivek's relationship with Joe Whedon and his wife, I mean, that's what led to the whole specialized thing. Biju, you know, Scratch Labs in the US, continent away, but my brother, you know. He gave us this energy, and still to this day, kind of, you know, I reach out to him when I'm like a little bit stuck about, you know, where, what, when, things like that. And the second thing I learned is you can come up with these big, you know, big plans to change everything, the system, but really at the end of the day is if you, it's very rarely that actually happens. You know, it's people see successes when they're finished products, but very few people are actually involved in starting out stuff. You know, it's not glamorous. It's not always highs. You really have to be driven by passion, with the financial kind of motive being quite secondary. And so what I learned, that second point was, don't try to change the system, just kind of personal action, you know, on an individual level, you know. And a lot of people take a dump on the system, you know, saying our federation is not doing enough, our government's not doing enough, the roads aren't paved, there's traffic, this and that. I mean, there's nothing new or original about those ideas, right?
Absolutely not.
And so you start to realize, those folks, those voices are going to be there, but really what those are not voices for change. They're just the background noise. That tape will keep playing, right? And so it's up to every one of us to take a small action, you know, come out and shoot a race, come out and volunteer for a race, come out and race a race, you know. It's easy to say, oh, it costs $500 to do a BBCH race. But what happens in the day when BBCH disappears? There's no racing calendar and everything regresses, right? So I'm like, $500, you know, I'll pay for a season ticket and support BBCH as a racing organization. It's people who in this case don't even race bikes, who are volunteering their time to grow something, to keep something going, you know. And so that's what I learned, individual action. It's the people. That's all that matters. And the other big thing I realized, the third thing I would say I realized was in those 2 years from coming with the idea of winning nationals and actually winning it, is that there's a lot of lessons, but I would say it's that winning a national championships doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't become easier. You don't end up, Patrick Lefevre is not going to call you on the phone.
Yeah.
Every single step after your first national title, if you want to progress in the sport, is not incrementally harder. It's and I wouldn't go so far as to say it's exponentially harder, but it's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Somewhere between an addition and an exponent.
Correct.
Perhaps a multiple.
Some other equation is
exactly. Yeah. Maybe a quadratic equation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. So it's a great point about you talked about complaining about the system.
Yeah.
And there you also mentioned talking about the Indian Federation or the conditions they organize the races in, or the lack of planning and all that. We can, complain about till the cows come home, but what can you do about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But also another point you talked about is the importance of platforms like BBCH. You were complaining about it costing $500, and what if that platform is not there?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
You probably wouldn't be. A lot of folks don't realize, but a lot of people wouldn't be in the sport. Because event organizers are one of the most important and at the same time the least appreciated actors in an ecosystem of sport. If you don't have events, there's nothing for people to get excited about. Sport at the end of the day is really about entertainment. It's to take, if anything we realized from the pandemic, it's that when you turn on the TV, if there's no sport on, what are you watching? You're watching the 24-hour news cycle, which is filled with, absolute rubbish, right? And negativity, right? Sport is so powerful. Sport as entertainment, right? It's pretty powerful. I mean, it takes our mind off of it. It impassions us. It wakes us up. It gives us the motivation in the morning to go out and do our run. And people don't realize it until it's all gone, right? I mean, and so, event organizers it gets people out of bed in the morning. Brands can showcase their products, I mean, it fuels the ecosystem. So
the event organizers being least appreciated is absolutely true. And I didn't realize that until I started my my own event as such, the bar race series, right? Although I run it as a kind of one-man show almost, with the help of a few friends volunteering now and then, that is different from doing something at a level of BBCH or Tour of Nilgiris or something like that.
Absolutely.
Things cost money. Things cost money to do.
And people's time is worth something.
Absolutely. Right. That's why I make it a point that if I am going to a race, I blog about it and put the word out there. And you mentioned
it's the reason why I go to races, because it puts a showcase on the racing, and there's something happening, right? And people in other cities get excited about it. And the next thing you know, there's a PBCH, a GBCH, a DBCH.
Absolutely.
Every city has a CH now.
Absolutely. So that kind of improves the system overall.
Absolutely. And that's the way that individual action you writing a blog about it, me just showing up to the start line, whether I win or lose doesn't matter. Everyone's gotta pull their weight a little bit.
And people like Che and turning up and taking pics, Veloscope, and all these guys have over a period of time have contributed.
And at the end of the day, if you notice what is the thread, it's consistency in action. all of us have been doing it
like month
it's like
after
brushing our
month.
teeth. Yeah.
Month.
It doesn't have to be glamorous. It doesn't have to be, but it's important.
Yeah.
Because when I showed up to the start line of BBCH in 2012, I probably knew everyone's name. Last weekend, I probably knew like 1/4 of that.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, we talked about you winning the first nationals in 2014 by half a second.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yep, half a second.
So
it was the difference between there's a picture of me crossing the finish line and I'm like furiously trying to hit the lap button on my Garmin. I mean that if it had taken me one more second to hit lap, I would have not been national champion. Who knows? Yeah.
Right. So was it Arvind Panwar
Yes.
behind you?
Yeah, it was Arvind behind me. Yeah.
Right. So it from that 2014 till now, it has been Arvind and you playing catch up with each other. And how many times did you win and how many times did he win?
So 2012, my first year here, Arvind had won the under 23 national title. So he was the best under 23. And he had won the elite road race.
Wow.
I was fourth in the break that year.
Uh-huh.
I was in the break. Me and his cousin Sachin created the break. So, and then 2013, Arvind had beaten me by whooped me by about 2 minutes. I wasn't even on Arvind's radar. And then 2014, I came back within half a second. It would have been a lot more, but 2 weeks before I'd come down with what is that waterborne disease? I don't know, something itis, which I was in a hospital taking loperamide. I lost about 5 kilos in body weight. So that was half a second. But then 3 months later, I won the national games by 45 seconds in Kerala over Arvind. Then 2015, I didn't compete at nationals because I picked up my first injury. But I coached Kiran, and so that was my first national championships that I coached a rider to.
Yeah.
So that was exciting. And Arvind won nationals that year in Kerala. So it's kind of like back and forth, literally for various reasons.
Yeah.
2016, I came back from Australia. I dominated that by about 45 seconds on Arvind. 2017, I'd won the double. I put about 45 seconds into Arvind again.
Yeah.
2018, I lost my first national title. That was just what I needed.
Right.
You know, it forced me to question my why again. You know, these moments that ask you to where you ask the question, why am I doing this? I mean, right after I lost, I picked up the phone and called a bunch of people and said, hey, I kind of let myself down. Do I have your support for next year? I want to kind of rectify it. And, you know, that's where a whole bunch of brand relationships started. And in 2019, I'd won by the biggest margin I ever have, almost 2 minutes, which I was on a different level last year. This year, if nationals happened today, I'd probably win by more than 2 minutes, but let's not talk about it.
Yes, let's not talk about it because Arvind Panwar might have a word or two about it.
No, it's been entertaining. And see, the way I look at it is, you've got to have somebody to push you, you know, and the fear is in the competition. Your ultimate, the person you're really battling at the end, that we all are battling at the end of our day, is our inner voice. That self-doubt. That is the biggest nemesis. You know, that's what I've learned. It's imposter syndrome. It's like, I don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not fit enough, or I don't deserve the win, you know. That's what I've learned from sport. It's the biggest competitor is that, you know, and it's not the other guy who you're battling on the day. And as soon as you realize that, you start to operate on a different level, I feel, you know. And it's easy to say that when you're winning, I feel, because when I go to Belgium, all of a sudden I'm not big dog anymore, right? There's like 40 guys who are stronger than me, right? Or 30 guys who are stronger than me. And at that point, all of a sudden, the theory of you're your worst enemy goes out the window. They're your worst enemy, right? So maybe it's a little bit of a perspective thing and position and where you are. But you know what? Even with 30 guys stronger than you on the line in Belgium, I still do believe that your biggest enemy is yourself.
Yeah.
It's self-belief. I mean, because there are some days, when I've ended up on the podium there in Belgium, I've ended up on the podium once, and a 6th place last year in a pretty decent size amateur elite race, the Danny Jonker here Memorial, and a bunch of guys who go on to Lotus Sudal the next year. And what I learned was there are those some days where you ride out of yourself.
Right.
And it's the days where you least expect something out of yourself. It's the days I've had my best days on the bike is when I didn't expect them to be amazing days. When that pressure of competition was not in my head. When I was doing it purely out of I just went into this flow state, right? And I truly believe, that I one of my big goals in the sport from a performance perspective is to get on the podium at the Asian Championships. And I truly believe that the thing that's standing in my way is my head. Along with other things, logistical challenges, financial challenges that I have to overcome and figure out solutions to. But at the core of it is like, do you believe that it's possible?
Yeah.
And I truly do believe it is. And so from a performance standpoint, that's what keeps me going. One of those external goals that keeps me going is that. So,
So it's another great point about you being your own enemy, right? The imposter syndrome is so relevant in every aspect of our lives. You don't deserve this, and that internal dialogue keeps on going, and you end up beating yourself so much that you don't need any other enemies outside, right?
Yeah, true. Absolutely.
So that is a great point, and one that I kind of noticed with your as an outsider with your journey is that you have this knack of helping your competition. As in, I've witnessed from quite close quarters that you were instrumental in Arvind continuing to perform. He is set with his railways job, and it's nothing taking away from his work ethic and all that, but you were, at least from what I kind of understood, you were the guy who set him and helped him find a direction in terms of finding a coach, setting up his coaching thing, and you kind of helped your own competition. I think by that you are indirectly helping yourself keeping on the edge.
There's two things to that. Okay, so one is this is you. People either get it or they don't. It's a little bit of a mindset, which I probably learned somewhere in the end of college. It's this idea that there are two types of people in the world: those who think that knowledge is power, right? And it is true, but then there's this other concept that you can only grow if you let go of old knowledge. And think about it this way. Okay, I asked you to cup your hands, and I don't know where this idea came from. For me, it may have been from reading a book by Tony Hsieh, the guy who the founder of Zappos, who passed away yesterday. But it may have been from his book. But this idea that you like hold your hands like this, and I asked you, and I put eggs in your hand, right? How many can you hold? Maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen if you're really strategic. But after that, what happens, right? Eggs keep dropping out. So there's no way to take on more. The only way to take on more eggs is to let go of the eggs that are in your hand, right? And you know what? When you hold on to knowledge in your head, as much as we like to think that humans have an infinite, we're only using like 5% of our brains out of that, right? I think there's a genuine limitation of how much knowledge we can hold on to. There's probably, we can remember, maybe 200 people's names. I don't know there are some stats out there that I'm sure a cognitive psychologist would be able to tell you. But I truly believe that yeah, there's only so much knowledge you can hold. And the only way to take on new knowledge is if you're willing to absolutely let go of your old knowledge. The other reason for that is, besides the physiological and cerebral limitations of our brain, it's also this, right? If you let go of your old knowledge and talk to someone about power meters, now they know about power meters. You hook them up with their coach. Now they are training at a very structured level with a phenomenal coach. You help them set up a coaching business, so now they're financially a little bit more stable, and you take them to Belgium, so now they're getting the same training stimulus. What that does is it lights a fire up your ass to say that if you decided to take a nap at any point, this guy is going to whoop your ass, right? And there's something about that, if you're really competitive, and if your goal is to not beat the other guy, but to improve yourself, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? I mean, and I genuinely believe my level's not going to go up unless the level of the competition kind of goes up. I have to be careful and engineer it in some way so that, my ship's not like lower. But I don't do it I make sure I don't do it in any negative way,
Absolutely.
Never. I mean, that's just out of the question. Then it becomes boring, right? So for me, that's one way I look at it. You've got to let go of old knowledge to really take on new knowledge and to apply it. And as human beings, we need external motivation on certain days. Those days when you're just lazy and you don't want to get out of bed, the thought of your competition getting out of bed, even if it's purely hypothetical, that thought experiment is enough to get us into action. It's just the competitive nature of human beings, right?
I think that's an amazing perspective, that really helps you as well as everyone around you.
The other reason why I kind of have that mindset, which reminded me, is this, right? What I started to learn is that, I've been in Indian sports since 2012, so that's almost 8 years. I've been in cycling since 2008, so that's almost 12 years. What I realized is, and what I realized also extends for outside of cycling, in life in general, your peer today, the people you are in the room with today, me as an athlete, Arvind, maybe a couple other guys, tomorrow, we're still pretty much going to be in the same room, maximum in the adjacent room, and somebody is going to be your boss, you're going to be somebody's boss, you're going to have to partner with someone in a different capacity. Maybe Arvind is the head of the Railway Sports Promotion Board cycling, coaching department. And ultimately, in life, I have this rule: if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it at all. And the golden rule, which is don't be an asshole. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. And so I always kind of try to keep that mentality, which is, just because you two are competitive today and you're trying to whack each other, go faster than the other guy, most probably, an athlete I coach today is going to be the CEO of some company tomorrow. And for me, you're always in a better position if every relationship you have is positive, if not neutral. So
absolutely. That's a great perspective as well. When you think about it, when you are giving as much or more than you are taking from the system, you are putting something out there to grow, right?
Exactly.
And what I see is that the knowledge you shared with others in terms of be it power meters or structured training, ways to train and all that. How many power meters did you see in 2012, 13, 14?
I was the only guy on the line with a power meter. Everyone was like, why is this guy racing with a 32 spoke wheel? This is like the national championships, Everyone had their fast forwards and stuff like that.
And now
it's everyone who knows how to use one and doesn't know how to use one.
Right? So that's the kind of shift that has happened.
5 years,
and 5 years, and the kind of people. There is no what another thing that I noticed is the training that the number of people that take training seriously and not just pick up a bike a couple of weeks before nationals, right?
Absolutely.
So that has changed phenomenally. People who even have stable jobs with the railways or something still take training seriously now and look to train throughout the season than they were before. So because they know that they can't just turn up now and do well.
And the other thing is, what is it to be normal, right? A lot of people, I mean, as social creatures, we look to the people around us to define what normal is. And in India, we're the first generation where cycling is really kind of taking hold. And 10 years ago, if you were riding a bike outside, you're a nut job. Right? Now it's like, oh, you ride a cycle. But still, the majority of India, it's like, why are you riding a cycle? So that's changing though, and that's inevitable. And
I think that way your contribution to Indian cycling has been phenomenal, at least in my view. That it is not just the number of titles you won, more than that, the impact you had into the ecosystem, adding it. I think that is something that is beyond the anything you have, any medals you have achieved. I think that is your biggest achievement, at least in my opinion. And kudos to you on that. Now let's switch gears a little bit, and I've asked previous guests of the podcast what do they, if they have any questions for you. And a couple of them, because it was a last minute thing, only a couple of them were able to get back to me, and they asked a couple of questions which are more or less similar, and something that a lot of us wonder when it comes to you. Okay. Arvind Bhattadya has this question for you. What is the biggest change you made as a cyclist that garnered the biggest improvement for you?
Okay, so I would say the biggest change that I made to my my training, of course, is the mental aspect of sport, but to my physical side of the sport, it was this, it was core work and the founder. I mean, to be honest, like, I mean, that simple thing of just focusing on your core, to this very day, it just keeps giving back. It constantly gives, no matter what level you reach.
Right.
Something as simple as plank, something as simple as the foundation routine by Eric Goodman. Game changing. Yeah,
I will link that video in the show notes for anyone who is interested. I think that is a very good.
While it's important for elite performance, it's even more important for the beginner. I just can't emphasize the importance of it.
Awesome. I think that's a great tip there. And Dipankar Paul has a question that is no, I think he is asking for a lot of not just for himself. If it was for himself, he would have asked that what is your FTP. But knowing him, stalking you and others on Strava, he might know. So his question was how to keep self motivated through the journey, and year after year, as the gains begin to flatten after hitting a peak, and it's tough to see big improvements through any kind of training, right?
Yeah.
So when you hit a certain level, how do you keep progressing, and how do you, when you don't see the same level of progression, how do you keep motivating yourself?
I mean, so to answer the first question about kind of how to keep self-motivated, I think one of the approaches that I use is, a lot of people, and this I see in the athletes that I work with, you see it in elite athletes, what happens after Peter Sagan wins 3 world championships, right?
Yeah.
Is the flame gone?
Yeah.
Or what happens, and the same question is faced by me, what happens after I win a national championship? So what happens if one of my athletes wins a national championships, then what? Or even if you're a beginner, right, your goal was to start your first race, what happens after that?
Yeah.
So the way I deal with it is simple. I make sure that I don't define the end goal or the terminus of my journey as like winning something. I always kind of keep a pie in the sky kind of goal, something beyond, something that's almost never perhaps attainable, or only attainable if everything goes perfectly, right? And for me, like I'll just share it. It's podium at the Asian Championships.
Yeah.
I mean, until that's achieved, I'm in this sport. I have a reason, at least from an external motivation standpoint, right? National championships, I may win, may not win. I may win another, 5, maybe 2 more. Who knows? So I really define goals that are not just within your reach, but at the same time they have to be realistic, right? Yeah. There's no point in saying, I'm not setting a goal of I want to get to the Olympics,
right.
It might be easy to get sponsors that way, but it doesn't motivate me on any level, right? Yeah. Because I know the steps to get there. Yeah. Realistic but lofty goals, you know, and also being very genuine about what happens is a lot of people have plans to a certain goal and have sacrificed their timeline of sacrifices planned all the way till their goal, but they don't have the timeline of sacrifices for the day after, something to extend. So in my goal setting or my planning, I also plan for what am I going to do once I get off that incredible high of possibly achieving my goal or not achieving it. Yeah. What am I going to do the next day? Right. That's super important. Whenever I have a training plan for my athletes, I always don't set the agenda till the goal. In my mind, at least, I also keep an agenda for what are we going to do afterwards. Yeah. So even if I don't burden the athlete with that mental computational kind of energy requirement, I make sure that there's something there. Yeah. And that's as far as motivation goes. As far as what do you do when progression starts to slow or you start to hit some sort of a physical peak, right? I mean, my FTP hasn't changed a lot since I've moved to India, right? Yeah. But the thing is, when another thing with my coaching style and what I've learned and from what I've seen from working with the best, is that the best coaches or the best athletes never actually talk about their FTP, because you realize it's just like it's like the small talk. Yeah. If you really know what you're talking about, you realize there's so many more dimensions to performance than just CP20, right? Yeah. And there's so many aspects to improve in your bike riding besides just CP20 or FTP or whatever, right? So for me, it's just kind of having this growth mindset that's just not focused on one metric. Yeah. For me, strength training. How can I improve my knowledge about lifting weights, more specifically to cycling, to increase my gains in other departments, right? How can I learn more about prehab and injury prevention so that I can ride longer and later into my life, right? Yeah. How can I learn more about nutrition and mental strategies to coping with failure and successes? Right. So there's so many aspects, and so there's so many dimensions besides that. I think it's just one aspect.
Yeah. So when you talked about goals and defining something beyond the goals, right? So we talked a little bit about identity based goals,
Yeah.
and having your identity nailed in,
Yeah.
and working in alignment with that identity
Yeah.
will keep you going for a long time, rather than if you are focused on a particular goal and you achieved it.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That question will not come in, and
Absolutely.
that dip of motivation or post achievement depression or whatever
Yeah.
won't arise if your journey is tied to your identity that
True.
is beyond these goals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And these goals are kind of
Checkpoints, yeah.
posts on that path.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that is a great point you said. And also, talking about CP20, so many of us, I am guilty of that myself when we started the power training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And focusing so much on those numbers
Yeah.
will take the joy out of you, the riding eventually.
Yeah.
But when you are like day after day, you are just focused on those numbers, and you forget why you why you started in the first place.
Yeah.
But then you discover as you go along that there are so many other aspects to riding a bike and winning races other than that CP20.
Absolutely.
So now you mentioned about weight training and getting better at all aspects of it.
Yeah.
Riding a bike, we get better at riding a bike.
Yeah. True.
Now, are we healthy overall?
Yeah.
Is our body fit overall?
Yeah.
So that becomes a huge thing as we age.
Yeah.
You,
True.
you have quite a bit of thing to catch up, but
Oh no, trust me. I mean, the moment you kind of disrespect or kind of take the body for granted, it has a way of saying, you know what, not so quick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had my share of injuries along the way, bad crashes, broken bones, and in those moments you're kind of forced to either kind of just Google investigate stuff or really reach out to professionals,
Yeah.
And so my physio Yash is, one of those guys who really kind of changed literally my longevity in the sport, because of that interaction that I had with a professional who knows about injury prevention and, rehab once you have an injury.
Yeah.
So that's super important.
So the prehab, making sure that your body is able to take the
resilient
is resilient, and then rehab. So if you are good with prehab, as in weight training and all that stuff, you won't need rehab. But ideally, but once you get into the situation, reaching out to the correct people and taking that long-term perspective of yourself, where you want to be. Say when you are 60 or beyond, do you want to just arms that fall off and you're not able to lift a chair from to move it from place to place, or you want to be strong overall, right? So that is a great thing about weight training, the importance of weight training that you talked about. So yes, I think those things for that thing addresses that. Now coming to a bit of broader subject of Indian cycling, right? Big topic. You have seen the not a decade, but last 8 years of progression, close to it, last 8 years of Indian cycling progression, and talk a little bit about that from where it was to where it is now, and then let us also touch upon where do you see it going in the next, say, 10 years.
Yeah, so I mean, things have changed very quickly over the last 8 to 10 years. Essentially, the competitive side of our sport was limited in terms of aspiration, right? The aspirational peak, the summit, was covered in clouds, right?
Yeah.
And the peak was assumed to be win my first national championship, so that you can secure a job with the government and kick the bucket down the road for a year or two, win a state award recognizing your achievements, retire, start a bike shop, or go back to working in the farms, or ticket collect, or whatever the vocations are that were available to cyclists at the top level. And then that's the athlete level. And at the federation level, you're like, okay, organize the national championships every year, kind of, and let's go and let's throw our hat in the ring to participate at the Asian Championships.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that's been the way it has been for the decade before, right? And what started to happen is a little bit of that the rising tide lifting all ships, right?
Yeah.
So people started to come in, guys like me, the Kinkini team set up, privateers trying to make a dent in it, traveling abroad and doing races abroad, even if it was at the amateur elite level in Asia. And then the federation seeing that this was happening and realizing that there is potential here, and also there's some incredibly hardworking people there in the federation who have who kind of initially there was a little bit of a threat perception, both on the private side and the federation side. But I think what everyone started to realize was everyone's just trying to move the sport forward, right? And in 2015, when we first went to Belgium as a private group of individuals, India has sent a team to Australia before to prepare for the Commonwealth Games. We bought brilliant coaches over here, Graham Sears, to coach the Indian team leading into the Commonwealth Games. We've done that, but not
that
much
is
success. Track and also
yeah.
road, actually.
Oh, okay.
But to not much success. But then they saw kind of privateers now trying to do that. And it's that idea of when there's somebody, on your heels trying to do what you are supposedly, that's your mission, right? There is a little bit of impetus, right, that's added. And I think it started to change on the federation side when they realized, oh, you know what? There's interest here. The sport's growing. The club scene is growing, right? And even an organization like a big federation says, okay, now our work's actually getting some eyeballs, right? Our sport's getting some eyeballs. So their motivation went up. And the first time that the Indian national team sent their aspirations were elevated was when the chief coach there of the track sprint team and the talent identification team latched on to an idea, right? And said, let's try elevating our sprint team, and it was based on a little bit of a gut thing saying that it's possible, right? And that opened the floodgates of dominance on the track in the sprinting at the junior level in the women's side, right? So Deborah Heddle, probably the first kind of rider in Indian cycling who's kind of in the recent history who's kind of achieved top level of Asian performance, right? And that started opening up the floodgates of what else is possible, going to the World Championships. And then within 5 short years, with kind of the talent that they identified, following that idea of the Belgian pathway that we took, saying, why don't we do that and send the national team to Germany, which is instead of trying to change the system here in some sense, that's what they said, instead of trying to import knowledge and try to apply it in the constraints of India, go to the best place in the world to do it, if you want to see a picture of the Mona Lisa, you don't get some guy to paint it for you and look at it in India. You go to the Louvre, right? And you see the Mona Lisa. And so it's that same idea, right? And that's opened the floodgates on the track side of things, where there's now global recognition of India's junior track sprinting prowess, right? And so now the question is, okay, both sides has elevated their game. The community level of racing, the growth of the sports at the grassroots level, thanks wholly to individual pockets around the country. And then you've got kind of this Olympic kind of funding, centrally funded kind of federation body that's kind of finding success on the track. Now the question is, are these two ever going to intersect in some way, right? It's going to have to be organic, you know, guys like us who are on the athlete side, you know, the federation side. Is there a place where we can interact, where we can intersect and kind of leverage the power of kind of what both sides bring, right?
Yeah.
I think that'll take time, but that's what's going to happen in the next 10 years, because guys who are competing now are eventually going to be in these federation structures in the future. It's never somebody from left field, right? Like I said, it's that small world concept, right? And so maybe now we don't see it, but it's the guys who are on the playing field today, who are kind of on the sidelines a little bit maybe today, who it's inevitable that these things intersect. And I think the magic happens when those two worlds kind of collide in a good way, right? And that's where it's headed, you know. Right now, I do my thing. I rely on the federation to get opportunities to represent the country. It's a little bit of it requires building of trust over time and realizing that we're both working towards the same goals. And that's happening very quickly, you know. So I think that's where we are. That's where we were. That's where we are, and that's where we're going, you know. And so everyone just has to do what they're doing, basically. And I think.
So we have seen track riders bringing in the medals at various levels, not just the Asian level, a little bit in the World Championships.
We are world champions in the team sprint.
Juniors. That is amazing.
It's really cool.
So, do you foresee, say, in the next 10 years, the road side of things and MTB side of things progressing, seeing that sort of progress?
I mean, ultimately, it's because of the nature of the sport and things like that we're seeing this kind of growth trajectory. You know, track sprint cycling on the junior side is essentially it's the only discipline that has it's the discipline that has the most Olympic backing, right? And so for a federation whose lifeblood is essentially high performance funding from the government, that's the angle at which they have to approach it. Road cycling and MTB, on the other hand, MTB is like literally relies on individual pioneers pushing. You know, it's like the opposite end of track. You know?
Absolutely.
And road, it's like MTB, except it's much more competitive because the field is incredibly
strong,
right? So in some sense, if you're an MTB rider trying to break in and perform at the world level, it's probably one of the hardest things to do, right? But at the same time, you control your destiny to some extent, right? With road cycling, even if you get the backing, are you the most talented person in the room? You know, because all of a sudden you're going to be in the most competitive, deepest, field of cycling as a discipline, right? Because it's been around the longest. And so the challenge is different there, right? Breaking in. Junior track cycling is in some sense the low-lying fruit. It is the safest path. But at the same time, what we've achieved is just a phenomenon, thanks to, again, the talent, and I know the people behind it, and I've gotten to interact with them, and it's by no luck that it's happened. It's through a lot of smart people actually making some pretty calculated and pretty wise decisions. You know? So the question is, can that momentum be used to kind of lift other aspects also, right? That takes a little bit more of a little bit more courage and a little bit more risk taking, and it can't just happen just by the federation doing it. It's going to need that, that intersection of worlds. So
So that is kind from the organizational perspective
Yeah.
of things. Now, when you look at riders themselves,
Yeah.
the younger generation of riders coming through,
Yeah.
do you see, because you are in touch with,
Yeah.
you scope the landscape
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah.
widely,
Yeah.
and do you see, foresee riders
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
and say surpassing the level that you and Arvind have, are kind of benchmarks right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Do you foresee people that are reaching that and going beyond?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, so I pretty much know who the strongest riders in India are at pretty much every category and male and female and every age. I keep enough of an eye on things that I know that. I don't think anyone else besides maybe one or two people in the federation who know as much about the competitive landscape and the talents that are there than I do, and that's just something that I have an eye for, you
Yeah.
know. And I've been fortunate to work with. I'm fortunate to work with some of the most talented right now, and have been fortunate to work with some of the most talented that I think have kind of whose lives have intersected with Indian cycling.
Yeah.
And to think that there isn't more of that out there, and to think that there isn't more of that at an even more level of talent, it's like if you know biology and basic statistics, it's like silly, right?
Yeah.
To think otherwise.
Yeah.
So the question is, now we are relying on pure luck for these talents to intersect with road cycling. And that's going to be the situation we face as the sport grows and becomes more popular, and things like that. And that's true with any sport. Randomly the most talented bicyclist in the world can walk in, his life intersects with Indian cycling, he ends up meeting me, we work together and we can get to the next level, or he walks into the Cycling Federation of India trials, and he walks down the track path, but that's just like pure luck. There isn't a big enough of a net to identify that kind of talent, right?
Yeah.
For a country of 1 billion people, and so that's the reality of it. And so we have to realize, it's gonna have to be a little bit of a waiting game, and a little bit of game of waiting for lightning to strike,
Right.
But in the meantime, there is enough talent here in India whose lives have intersected with cycling that can reach the level that Arvind and I have reached, or the best in the sport is at, both on the track and in the road, and even surpass it, right? So right now the challenge in India is, I tell myself, it's a standard I kind of maintain for myself, that I make sure that nobody in India at least is training harder than me. And so right now I haven't met, there are some kids who I work with now who are more talented than me, but they haven't gotten to the place in their life where they're working harder than me, right? And it's and results and progression lies when talent and hard work really come together, right?
Yeah.
Both of them match the level. And so Gagan, for example, a rider that I coach, that you coach, that you kind of help support and get into the sport, is one of those riders who's just like, as far as numbers go, there's no one in Indian cycling who has higher metrics than him in certain aspects, but does that rider want to make this something that he wants to pursue? And it's not for everyone, right? You can't force an athlete to do something. It's got to come from within, right?
Yes.
I mean, on the other end, a rider like Aman, who I worked with in the past, and he's probably the second most talented rider that I've seen in the sport. Stuff happens in life, and kids grow, and they become adults, and they figure out what they want or what they don't want, and not everyone wants to be make cycling a professional sport. So there's an incredible amount of just sheer luck and factors that have to come together.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So the factors that you mentioned, right? It is just beyond just that power you can, the sheer talent that you have.
Absolutely.
It is beyond that. It comes through the realization. What are the other factors? Factors from what is it that you want, that the rider wants, and easy gate for that kind of effort. That kind of sacrifices, that
the choices. Yeah, I mean it's such a variety of factors. I mean, it's easy to think that in an age where 22-year-olds are winning the Tour de France, that it happens randomly, but it requires a lot of nurturing and saying the right things from kind of, you know, the support systems and things like that, and doing the right things at the right time, reaching out to the right people for advice and help, professional help, you know, help off the bike, all of those things. And so it's in some sense it's like less of a probability than probably a roulette, you know.
So it is just beyond talent, and we are talking about a lot of different factors coming together. So it is not the dearth of talent for the talent we are because the nature of cycling scene growing, we are seeing a lot more of these young talented guys coming up. Now it is a matter of, will the other factors also add to that talent, and then that would translate to us seeing results at higher and higher levels. Great. So when it comes to talents coming to the fore, the community racing and the events play a big role, right? So how do you see the growth of community racing over the years, and how do you see how do you see the importance of the role that the community racing
super important, right? Just I think the best way to explain this is anecdotally. I get a kid from, say, what's a third, fourth tier city in Rajasthan, I don't know, something smaller than Bikaner, message me, right? 14-year-old kid. So today morning I got four messages from four 14-year-old kids. One in Chandigarh, one in Guwahati, one in Delhi, and one in Mumbai, right? 14-year-old kids. One of them is 13 actually. He raced yesterday in Chandigarh. And these are kids who are asking me for coaching, right? I wish there was a way for me to say, yes, let's do this, you know? Now, the kid in Jaipur or the kid in Bikaner doesn't have a racing, a community racing system there. He doesn't have a group of elders, a peer group of riders of a similar age who have an equal passion for the sport, right? He's got nothing to say, hey, come out, let's ride tomorrow, or this is what you need to do, this is how you set your saddle height, or someone to lend him his first pair of cycling shoes, right? Okay, the kid in Delhi might have a bunch of young riders to train with, but in Delhi with the pollution, you don't have the ecosystem, or you don't have the racing culture. In Guwahati, this kid has a mountain bike, a road bike, and he doesn't have a peer group to train with, right? So, so how do you actually advance in a sport when none of those things that were essential to an average talent like me getting into the sport? I told you about my journey. To get into it, if none of that exists, right? You have an immense amount of passion in these 14-year-old kids, the willingness to learn and really commit at such a young age, right? 20 years earlier than I, than me. And so what do you tell those kids? The answer is wait it out, you know? I mean, short of moving to Bangalore and which not everyone can do, and it's not realistic for everyone to kind of build a life on that wing and a prayer. what do you tell those kids?
Yeah.
You know, how do you let them down gently, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is no academy that takes them in. There are no high quality summer camps for these kids to attend. If they exist, they're probably going to be expensive, logistically challenging to get to. So the only answer, the honest answer, you know, is wait. And I replied to all of those kids saying, you know, generic answers like train 5 days a week, you know, ride your bike 5 days a week and make sure you're enjoying it. That's it. Yeah, that's all I can say. So
yeah. So that man, that's such a great example, you know, live you shared about the importance of having an ecosystem of events, races, and a community that kind of supports you, a group of people to ride with. And everything is so important
all
for
important parts of the It's like going to Mars and trying to breathe. You can't do it. There's no atmosphere.
Yes.
So
the environment plays a big role, and that's why the platforms like BBCH here,
club teams,
even
if it's at whatever level of seriousness, like for a 14-year-old kid to have, like, you know, like Spectrum will have a, you know, 40-year-old IT engineer with 2 kids, neurosurgeon who rides bikes, and Aussie guy who rides a mountain bike. Just having that group of people around them is super important. Yeah,
an 18-year-old special kid.
Exactly. Yeah.
That can be part of the same group, and these old men.
Multi-generational, different walks of life. It's essentially a club, you know. And you not necessarily have to wear the same jerseys or have the same lifestyle or this and that, but you ride bikes, and that's what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So, and you know, funny that you mentioned it, the concept of teams, right?
Yeah.
And people to ride together.
Yeah.
I always tell people when they ask about you know, being part of Spectrum or something, I said, if you end up with one team in the entire city, what fun is it? You got to see, you have a group of people, okay, form a team. What is stopping you from forming a team and
I mean, a team is different from a club. A team is kind of at some point you have some unifying identity, you know, whereas a club is more open to really it's a little bit more of a more open kind of thing, and a more in and out, you know, you're free to walk in and out. A team is some sort of buy-in, there's some sort of thing that you guys want to kind of do together. So I mean, a club, a team, all of those important parts.
I think that, you know, we I think this is high time for us to we have a bit of teams now, you know, be it Spectrum, be it LBB, be it Veloscope and team Too Tired and Team Bros. So now there are teams. I think now it is also time to expand and maybe look at the club culture as well. I think we need to
I think this is kind of off topic, but just talking about kind of Bangalore cycling a little more specifically. But I think without politicizing stuff, I think in India we do tend to be, well, that's true anywhere actually. We tend to kind of politicize stuff and try to make everything a power play or a land grab or a money grab, right? And it's like looking for sponsors, and, you know, I mean, there's only so much support. But I think there is room to kind of formalize club structures and do something more than just, but it requires the right people stepping up and doing it in a very neutral way. So I know there's room for a lot of growth. For sure.
Let's see what future has.
Exactly.
But I think the coming back to the topic of events being so important, the events like BBCH, Tour of Nilgiris, Tour of Glory, Tour of Karnataka, these give one goal to look at and work towards and keep you centered. So that, and also they act as platforms for all these younger kids to showcase their talent.
Absolutely.
How do they come to the radar of
Yeah.
CFI
Yeah.
or a Wattbombs
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
unless they have a
True.
platform, right?
True. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the role of community racing in the future of cycling,
Yeah.
which is very critical as we just talked about. Now, coming back to you and specific the training, let us talk a little bit about training and nutrition.
Okay, so training. So my ideas of training have probably gone through about 4 kind of levels of enlightenment, I would say. Let's call it that. When I first started out, training was how to get a higher average speed,
Yeah.
right? And how to push my physical limits, ride a little bit longer, ride a little bit faster, just finish a little one position higher, move up one category, right? And the way I went about doing that is just riding when I felt like it, riding with people who are stronger than me, bugging them to ride with them. And on one ride, for example, there's 3 anecdotes. One ride was when a rider stronger than me, I went on a ride, his name is Daniel Mendoza, but a graduate student in my college, and took me on this ride. He went up this hill really fast, he dropped me, and I was in the middle of nowhere. I knew not where I was. And it's like, don't be afraid to get dropped, you know?
Yeah.
A second ride, I'd gone out with another friend of mine, Greg Christian, now a nuclear scientist, guy with the biggest calves in the world, 420 watt FTP, could have been a professional, but didn't want it, you know? He was incredibly smart, and I went out on these 100, 200 kilometer rides with him, and I would just stay on his wheel. That was my goal. Stay on the wheel of a guy who's stronger than you, right? He probably waited for me a lot. Because, but it's just that idea of that it's okay to suffer once in a while, and, you know, just ride at a level that's outside of your comfort zone, you know, with someone who's better than you, again, you know. You know, so the third anecdote was another roommate of mine, Chris Uberti, probably one of the best domestic sprinters in the US. And he taught me this concept of cadence. Pedaling a bike is about just going out and making sure that when you're on a bicycle, you know, with running, if the moment you stop moving your legs, you don't run anymore. You're not running. People have this idea that cycling is about being on a bicycle. You're only actually cycling if your legs are moving. You know? So I see a lot of people riding bikes and on the highway, and it's like, they're just like coasting, you know, for half. They did a 3-hour ride today. They covered 100 kilometers, but they were only riding for about 50K. The rest of it, they were just coasting. So this idea that when you're out on a bike, spin your legs, right? Anyway, to sum it up, my first level of training was going by feel, training and learning from people who are stronger than me, getting outside of my comfort zone and what my perceived limits were, with people who knew what they were doing, right? I learned about cadence, I learned about distance, I learned about getting dropped on a hill and not being afraid. It's not the end of the world. So do all these things. Don't be afraid of hills. Don't be afraid of headwinds. Don't be afraid of distance. It's all doable. And when you do it with someone who's done it and who does it at a really high level, you learn, right? And that carried me all the way through my collegiate racing and time when I was in the US. I started to ride and race with an eye towards performance and results and bettering myself in an objective way when I came back to India. Because all of a sudden I set this goal. I had to beat a bunch of other guys. I had to go a certain speed and then go faster than that fastest speed. So all of a sudden now my haphazard way of just riding and all of that wasn't going to work. I got my first power meter. That was where I got introduced to the world of power meters, got my first coach. I was introduced to structured training. Right? That's the idea of structured training is it's easy to get faster. You ride a lot, you take a little bit of recovery, you're fast in the next week, right? Don't get injured, don't get sick, all of those things. But what working with a coach and working towards a goal taught me is now it's not enough to just be faster on some random day.
Yeah.
You have to be the fastest you can be on a particular day, on your event day.
Yeah.
You can't let your nerves get in the way. You can't let your body get in the way. You have to perform optimally on that day, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the second level of enlightenment, right? I mean, the third level of enlightenment was now I started racing outside India. I started to see what the level of racing was. I knew what it was, but now I was firsthand experiencing it.
Yeah.
Racing in Belgium, getting dropped in my first race, 100 meters into the race.
Yeah.
And going to Australia, riding on a professional team for a year, being against some of the most talented riders in the world, seeing world-class talent sleeping in the bed next to me for the first time in my life, right? 17-year-old kid with an FTP 150% more than mine, right? What's different about him and me, right? It's easy to get clouded by the fact that talent is everything. Granted, you know, Harry was born with an FTP of, you know, 400 or whatever. Higher mitochondrial density, better response to high intensity training, all of those magical things that make you a talent. But at the end of the day, what I realized was, you know, there's one other department that I'm lacking in. I'm not training as hard as him yet. I think I'm training really hard. Back then, my mileage was around 15,000 to 17,000, 20,000 kilometers. This guy and professionals are riding 20,000 as a minimum, right? 20,000 plus. So I told myself, okay, I can get hung up on the fact that I'm not as talented and say, not for me. Or I can actually try and close a gap that actually exists. Work harder. You know, this idea of kaam karo, right? There's 100 excuses, but how many of those are in your control, right? And so the third level of enlightenment was I used to say this a lot, but then I actually applied it, right? Lots. Right. You know, and that's just doing anything more than you have done it before. You will get better at it as long as you don't get injured. Right? And so that was the third level of kind of, you know, enlightenment. And, you know, the numbers weren't going up. The power numbers weren't going up, but I was feeling like my body was changing. You know, when you start to ride that much, you change on a tissue level. You know, you change on a molecular level. Right. You know. And so that now I look at as my superpower in Indian cycling. Nobody trains more than me, you know. Maybe there are a couple of breve guys who ride more, but nobody's riding as fast as me and at the level at which I'm training and with the quality with which I'm training. And so for me, it's like, okay, that's now what can I do, right? So the fourth level of enlightenment is where I would say I am now. I'm sure there are more levels to it, but right now I'm in a place where forget the numbers. It's about you know, the final few years in my career in sport at a high performance level. I'm never going to be faster. I'm never going to be stronger. You know, in these next couple of years, I'm going to set these goals where I'm going to try and squeeze as much as I can out of myself. So like we mentioned off camera, it's like the first time I'm working with a coach again since my first coach and my second coach, and it's because I want to try and see you know, what more I can get out of myself. And really now it's just all in the head. And so I'm not as fussed about numbers. Like yesterday I did an indoor trainer workout. I was supposed to do 40 minutes of SST at 330 watts. And previously I would stress about it. You know, I'd be like 330 watts on the trainer for 40 minutes straight. No way I'm going to be. I haven't touched the trainer in a month. You know how that feeling, right? Hopping on the trainer, you feel like an amateur. So what I did was I just decreased the resistance level to I think 300. That's almost 10%, right? But life is too short to stress about 30 watts in one 40-minute session on the trainer, right? I've done 22,000 kilometers in the year. This is not gonna, you know, this doesn't define me, right? It's being able to adjust and be calm even when your body or your mind or whatever is not giving you what you expect of it on that particular moment, right? Correct. Realizing the big picture, right? You can go out and, you know, do something special tomorrow, right? So that's what I'd say.
Awesome. The levels of enlightenment in terms of training, quite a nice gives a nice perspective of what it takes for an athlete like you to uh, keep going and keep seeing improvements, because you are improving in terms of the work you are putting in, and obviously that plays a big role in seeing the improvements that you are continuing to see.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to nutrition,
nutrition is something that I've never, like I said, growing up, it was never part of my lifestyle. You know, for me, nutrition was shawarma for dinner, Kit Kats for breakfast, Twix, Kit Kat, Bounty, every Middle East dessert you can imagine. And college kind of shook me a little bit because I saw what it meant to have a balanced kind of lifestyle, exercise and nutrition, both in kind of some sort of equilibrium. The thing about cycling and endurance sport is you burn a lot of calories, and so calorific transgressions are typically cancelled out, right, in some sense. And so the real challenge becomes what happens when you're really pressed for time and you're not able to train as much. And, you know, at that point, the way I look at it, and I've not reached nutritional nirvana in any sense of the word, or uber enlightened there. For me, I've come to a point where the way I look at nutrition is this: it's a dance. 2 steps forward, and as long as you're not taking 2 steps back or 3 steps back, that's good enough.
Okay.
For me, I look at nutrition as, okay, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's a waltz,
Yeah.
you know? And I am becoming more and more okay with that. And the other thing about nutrition is, I'm just starting on this journey, which is like, I'm not looking at being like, super lean or super fit. I've never aspired to do that, especially being a big guy in the past. It's never been an aspiration for me to go to that kind of side of things. But the way I look at it is, I don't have to be super in shape all year. You know, it can be seasonal. You know, it's like when I'm coming to my big goals, focus on, really hyper focus on nutrition and stress about it. But otherwise, just be kind of sensible about it, you know. That said, I do try to follow this other rule of thumb, which is, if I don't cook it myself, don't eat it, you know. And that rule really works wonders. I think it gets you a long way towards being just healthier. If you can't enter in my fitness, so I just think in my head, I don't even go through the act of doing it, but if you can't enter how many calories or the food item you ate in MyFitnessPal, right, don't eat it. Right? If you don't know what the shop biryani, the Watt biryani, if you can't enter it into MyFitnessPal, don't eat it. I mean, that's not to say don't eat mutton biryani all the time, at all. It's like, don't eat it every day. You know? So
If I were to follow the earlier rule of if you can't cook yourself, don't eat it, that doesn't apply to me, because I can cook every damn thing in the world.
That's also a kryptonite, I guess.
And I can make biryanis of different kinds.
And
brownies and bake all kind of baked stuff.
So the rule applies only if you don't cook well.
Yes. But great pointers. But when it comes to, say, for racing, so in-ride nutrition and
when
race
it comes
race
to
day
that,
nutrition,
I'm dialed. I don't think there's too much room to improve. Even at the top levels that I've performed at the Belgian Kermesses and the Asian Championships, that I've dialed. I have never cramped or bonked at the most important events in my life so far as a competitive cyclist. Not yet. So that's been dialed, and usually the weeks, 2 to 3 weeks is the window I set for myself. I usually get off coffee, a weight comes down to my kind of optimal. I've never gone under 70 ever, because that takes more than 3 weeks to go from. I usually sit around 70, 72 and a half to 73 during my low motivation periods or off periods or times where I take off the pressure. I go up to 74, never cross 75. So I have kind of some limiters in my head to know where I am.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time in my life that I've come under 70, and I feel it's just from the calmness that I feel of, not having to race.
Yeah.
It's funny that when the goals are taken away, it's when I'm the calmest, Perhaps something there. But yeah, so nutritionally, just the basics, and one of the books that I read that really nailed a lot of stuff home, there's 2 resources. One is, and I'm sure there are better books out there and stuff, but what did it for me was the Feedzone Portables book by Alan Lim, and Biju also was part of that project. There's a little forward in that book. It's about 30 pages, but the nutrition information that's been laid out there and what the calorie equations are for active people, it's just so clearly laid out there and so succinctly laid out there without being very bombastic about or complicated about things. Those 30 pages, I wish it was a booklet, I'm sure there are resources out there, but this I found to be really that really armed me. And I would say that's the main thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the what is the book again?
Feedzone Portables.
The Feedzone Portables.
Or the Feedzone cookbook. Both of the forwards have that. Those 30 pages of just nutritional nuggets.
Nice.
Phenomenal.
Nice.
Yeah.
When it comes to say raised day calorie intake, do you do like a hourly 300 calorie kind of thing?
So as far as in-days nutrition, just kind of following those rules of thumb, right, which is 60 to 90 grams per hour. Those rules of thumb, they work.
Yeah, they work.
There's a reason for it, and you just have to spend a little bit of time figuring out what nutritional mix works for you to hit that 60 to 90. For different people, it's different. For some people, they swear by idlis with peanut butter in it. For some people, I swear. I haven't changed mine from yoga bars and fasten up energy gels. And as long as you meet that, you're gonna be fine. And those people who think that they're outliers, good for them. Yeah.
Great. The training and nutrition tips there are quite useful for a lot of us. And now coming to the all-important subject that I wanted to talk to you about, that I am more focused on nowadays, is weight training.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what do you see the role of weight training playing in terms of your cycling goal?
So, I got introduced to the benefits of weight training and just strength training actually in one of my phases of injury, and piriformis syndrome, tendinopathy in my right hamstring, at the hamstring origin, right, where it sits under the sit bone. And so Yash sorted out my kind of spasmed muscle and things like that with physio work. But then the prehab work started, and the prehab work involved a lot of single leg strength work to bring that leg, which for 3 months had been basically out of the equation, right, while I was still kind of pushing through with training and Google investigation. And so that was my first introduction to the paradigm of single leg strength work. I'd always been doing a lot of core, but once I got healthy again and realized, man, the single leg stuff works. Doing 20 reps on the injured leg and 10 on the other, eventually, yes, it gets strong. In fact, it comes back in some cases stronger, right? Then I started introducing kind of complete strength, and full body compound movements like the squat and the deadlift. The biggest thing, whenever I work with my athletes, there are a few of them who are always hyper excited about introducing weight training to their routine, right? Because you see the professionals doing it in the YouTube videos and all the fancy balance stuff that the MTB guys do, and they're like, I want to do this because it's going to make me a lot faster. It's going to add 20 watts to my FTP. But the thing that I tell people is that weight training is only useful if you do it absolutely perfectly with form, right? Because a slip disc or a compressed disc can lead to a lot of time off. A tendon injury from bad form can lead to changing your life forever, right? So weight training is one of those things. Unlike riding a bike, weight training, if done right, massively beneficial. If done wrong, it's not just neutral or you don't improve, you're actually unhealthy, right? Sometimes it can be debilitating, right? And so don't do it unless you do it armed with, there is no halfway weightlifting, you know? It's not like riding a bike, you can ride your bike with high cadence or low cadence and you'll be fine for the most part. But with weightlifting, if you're not doing it with perfect form, don't do it, you know? And just do calisthenic work, body weight, maybe single leg stuff with just body weight. That's very hard to injure yourself. As far as what the benefits of weight training are, it just makes you a more resilient human being. Forget athletic performance. And it's one of those things. There are two types of people in the world. One who will go through life realizing how amazing weight training is, and then there's the other who will never know what it's like, you know, and it'll be a less lived life, in my opinion. That's how beautiful it can be to improving your overall sense of well-being. It just makes you feel better, you know. Just like that cycling, the positivity you get from cycling, weight training adds a whole different dimension of that level of positivity. And it comes from that tendon resilience and postural kind of improvements and just the way you walk.
The stability that it gives.
When you're on the bike, absolutely. So super important, but with caution.
With caution. And do you have, say, 3-4 key kind of lifts or exercises that benefit cycling?
If you know how to do, like I said, perfectly, the squat and the deadlift, right? And even if you're doing it with just a bar, right, with perfect form, has the potential to really change, improve mobility, increase that tendon resilience a little bit more, so that when you're pushing big gears on an uphill or into a headwind, you're less likely to experience knee pain, things like that, right? For the average person, I think single leg work is really beneficial.
Lunges and
something as simple as lunges and single leg deadlifts, stiff leg single leg deadlifts, right? Those are two movements. It's basically splitting up the squat and the deadlift into a single leg movement, right? So just those two exercises with me, that's it. That's what I would, and the founder. That's like, when I go to the gym tomorrow to start my weight training again, after almost a year off, it'll be the squat, the deadlift, single leg lunge, single leg or split squats, single leg deadlifts, and a foundation routine, and some core work to kind of, put a ribbon on it. So
almost a year of training.
Almost a year. Actually, beginning of this year, I was in the gym a little bit in my preparations for the Asian Championships, which got cancelled. So it's been almost 9 months. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Super,
it's gonna be awesome.
Also, I think the Corona and closing of the gyms,
which is why I haven't been able to go in. And now feels like the right time to be able to, go in without risking too much.
Awesome. Okay, so let us kind of dive into a little bit of maybe a bit of harder stuff. Like, what are some of the biggest hurdles you faced in your journey so far, and how did you overcome?
There's so many, but one of the toughest moments for me was right now, it's deciding and building up the momentum and the confidence to push through to achieve the final goals that I have. So it's really just a mental thing, and it's about building momentum. The way I tackle kind of challenging goals is building momentum with small actions. So small things like, focus on stabilizing my coaching work so I have a financial basis, reach out to sponsors so I have the equipment covered, and then sign up, work with a coach again for the first time in a very long time. So my physical progression is looked after, right? So the right now is the biggest challenge I've ever faced,
Yeah.
As far as challenges that I've faced in the past that really kind of forced me to rethink stuff, coming second in the national championships in 2018, that forced me to ask the question, why am I doing this? And if I can't be the best in India, why am I making all these sacrifices? So it's a simple equation that I set up in my head so that if ever I doubt what I am doing, I just have to revisit that equation. Unless I am the best, then if I'm not the best, then don't do it, right? Because the level is not that high here, right? So I should be able to maintain it and progress and build on it. So that 2018 loss was super important to reevaluate and to refocus and say, if you're doing something, do it at least with 100%, right? Don't do it at 99 or 98. Another challenge was signing my first professional contract in 2015. And that also was another moment where I was like, the lack of self-belief and things like that. But that, and also in combination with that, the financial challenges of okay, the opportunity is there, but how do I create bring about the support that I need to do it? So breaking past this barrier of just setting the ego aside and asking for help from people. So I think those are kind of the two big ones, big three, I would say, in kind of reverse chronological order.
Okay, nice. So from your experience working with a lot of student athletes, a lot of working athletes even, you would have seen them going through a lot of their own challenges. So what are the kind of challenges that you see them facing, and how do they overcome it, or how do you maybe
Good
help?
question. I mean, at the end of the day, to boil it down, the biggest challenge that I see with every athlete that I coach is, and I like coaching because it gives me a different perspective. It requires me to be incredibly objective, and it requires me to help athletes. The way I see my job as a coach is help my athletes get through the challenging times, because the non-challenging times are easy. Anyone can do that, right? That's where I try to bring value. And all the challenges that my athletes face, whether they're working athletes or students in college or at school, it's all the same. It's typically the biggest challenge is themselves. It's self-doubt, it's lack of confidence, it's imposter syndrome, it's that's it. It's the mind. And so you realize as a coach, setting the training plan and driving progression in FTP is the easy bit. It's how are you going to change your athlete's mindset. I mean, think about it. I mean, you're psychologically altering someone's emotional state. And figuring out how to do that for 24 people. All of a sudden you feel like a mother. And but not every coach takes on that, right? Some say, oh, my responsibility ends at the 4-week mesocycle, right? And setting the power targets and the number of reps and things like that. And I think the good coaches, the ones that really get everything out of their athletes, are the ones who are willing to cross that line. And I've had people tell me, you don't need to do that, for X amount a month. That is not a responsibility that person is paying you enough to take on. Moms do that for no money, but or a significant other or a friend does that for no money. But as a coach, that's a line that I've decided as Wattbombs coaching, as a coach there, to kind of allow that line to be crossed, because that's where I feel real breakthroughs are made. And and I can remember instances with every single one of my athletes where I've had to cross that line multiple times. You know? And that's what I like the challenge of that. Because otherwise coaching is pretty boring actually. You can just sign up for trainer role.
Yeah. So that's a very good point because when with my own coaching, I tend to take on that role with the younger guys, and was initially hesitant to kind of take on the that role with older athletes, because I kind of had that hesitation. Would that be a line too much to cross, or should I hold myself to just providing the plans and forget about it. Then I kind of realized that by kind of holding back there, I am not living up to my own standards of what a coach needs to be.
Correct. Yeah.
Because when I was working with Gagan or Shri or Mani, I kind of fathered them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
When it's kind of coaching, I'm looking at every aspect of it. What are they thinking? And correcting them where their thought process is not in line with what is right. But when it came to the older athletes, so that is where now I've kind of come to realize that okay, this is also a very important aspect even for them.
True.
Right. So that is what kind of changed myself in the recent months. And it's I
mean, if you talk about elite, I mean, we're all humans at the end of the day, whether you're an 18-year-old human or an 80-year-old human or somewhere in between, a 40-year-old human. Ultimately our biggest enemies are ourselves. And if you look at a guy who's starting to ride a bike, or a woman who's ridden bikes a lot, or even if you're the world champion Rowan Dennis, you still have to fight the psychological demons, right? And in elite sports performance, they call you a sports psychologist, and it's not the responsibility of the coach. So there's a line there. But at the amateur level that we're working at, I mean, that's more of a coaching conversation, and every coach defines what their principles are, right? As a business or as a service, and there's no right and wrong. You just got to figure out what you want to bring to the table.
Exactly.
So so it works for some people don't look for it, and some people just aren't willing to open up, but you set the tone as a coach,
Absolutely. Great, NJ. This has been a great conversation, talking about your own journey, your learnings, and sharing with everyone on the podcast. Thanks a lot for your time. Is there one question that you wish people asked you more?
No, actually, enough questions.
Thank you for your time.
Cool.
Hey all, make sure you subscribe to the Working Athlete podcast if you haven't already, on YouTube or Spotify or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Venki's churning out some awesome content. Make sure you don't miss any of it by subscribing now.